Thank you. My question is to the Premier. The Liberals promised that selling Hydro One would magically fix transit. The fact is, the money brought in by the sale of Hydro One won't come close to delivering real help to families and cities coping with gridlock. In fact, the sell-off of Hydro One
Minister of Economic Development
to do with building transit, and the Premier knows it. TTC riders in Toronto are being asked to pay more for cash fares. City councils across the province are asking for support, yet transit riders everywhere are being asked to pay more for services while services are being cut. Why is the Premier failing commuters?
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I just have to say the magical thinking is not on this side of the House. The magical thinking is on the other side of the House in the third party, Mr. Speaker, where somehow all the projects that are needed across the province, the roads, the bridges, the transit systems, that somehow those can all be built without making one tough decision. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that's not the case. So I would say to the member opposite, when he goes down the list of projects that we are building, whether it's the Kitchener line, which will be partly electrified and the weekly trips will go from 80 to 250, or the Lakeshore East line, the annual ridership will go from 10 million to 32 million, or the $1 billion for the Hamilton LRT, or the support for Smart Track, which is the single most important project that the Mayor of Toronto wants to implement. Which one of those would he cut, Mr. Speaker, because of his magical thinking?
Thank you. Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier knows it, and her entire caucus knows that selling off Hydro One is not the solution. There are far better solutions and far more solutions, and it's not the way to do it. The Premier may not realize this. But people who rely on transit also pay hydro bills. Selling Hydro One off will actually hurt families twice. Once, as they continue to wait for the bus or sit in traffic on their commute, and again, when they finally get home and open up their hydro bills. Does the Premier realize that selling off Hydro One actually hurts families twice?
Speaker, what hurts families is if they don't have the roads and the bridges and the transit that they need, Mr. Speaker. What hurts Ontarians is if they don't have an excellent company delivering their electricity, Mr. Speaker. And what hurts Ontarians is if they don't have all the facts. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite, when he's doing, because there's a political campaign that he's engaged in right now with his party to fearmonger among people about what's going to happen because we are investing in infrastructure and we're broadening the ownership of Hydro One. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't talk to his constituents and the constituents in ridings around the province about the investments that their municipalities, their communities are going to get because of the decisions that we are taking. We know, Mr. Speaker, that there is not a municipality in this province that doesn't need infrastructure dollars. We're providing those infrastructure dollars, Mr. Speaker, and we're making the tough decisions in order to do that.
Mr. Speaker, what we know is the vast majority of Ontarians don't want this government to sell off Hydro One. What we know is the vast majority of municipalities don't want this government to sell off Hydro One. People are stuck in their cars or packed like sardines in transit, and they're looking for some relief. Selling off Hydro One doesn't actually build transit, and according to the FAO, it could raise as little as $1.4 billion. Selling off Hydro One.
Member from Newmarket, Aurora, come to order.
And the Premier knows this, and her entire caucus knows this. TTC is Toronto's second biggest electricity consumer, and the GO electrification is going to mean more electricity consumption for GO Transit. Higher rates are going to have real impacts on these transit providers.
Thank you. The member from Essex and the member from Eglinton Lawrence, it's enough. You have one sentence to wrap up, please.
Higher rates are going to impact transit providers, and that means higher fares. Will the Premier stop the sell-off before she does any more damage to this province?
Minister of Transportation.
Thanks very much, Speaker. Thank the member, of course, for his question. Speaker, this very same debate and discussion has come up several times
Member from Hamilton Mountain.
over the last couple of weeks, and it's interesting again that the Deputy Leader of the NDP would ask us or would talk about what's on the minds of our caucus on this side of the House. I said this last week, Speaker, what's on our minds is making sure that we build the province up. What I think is important, though, Speaker, is that the Leader of the NDP and the Deputy Leader of the NDP have a conversation with backbenchers on that side of the House, Speaker, because every single one of the NDP caucus colleagues that he has a specific request or a desire to see infrastructure projects occur in each of their ridings, whether we're talking about London or Toronto or Essex or Niagara Falls, Speaker, or the North, four-laning highways, building more transit in every single region of the province, Speaker. Why won't you level with the people in your own